Hi, I'm Gareth Kane. Welcome to the Net Zero Business Podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Sarah Mukherjee MBE, Chief Executive Officer of the Institute of Sustainability and Environmental Professionals, ISEP, which some people may know by its old name of IEMA. But we'll dig into all of that in a second. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a real honour. Thank you.
Well, it is a bit of a close shot. I should declare an interest. I'm a fellow of ISEP before we start, so I do have skin in the game. The first question we always ask our guests is, where did your sustainability journey begin? Was there a particular moment when you suddenly decided that this was your career?
That's a really good question, Gareth. And I suppose, I mean, it started in a way, and looking back often, particularly when you're talking to people in the early stages of their career, and I think when they're sitting where they are and you are where you are in a very different place maybe in your career, it looks like you've had this massive master plan and it's all been carefully thought out, and every few years you go and do something else. In fact, I think most people find that their careers are a combination of luck, chance, and judgment.
Yeah.
I know we've all had those sliding doors. I know that does age me. The sliding doors film where one of the lead characters either gets into the tube or not into the tube as the doors slide. And if you had not gone down that path, something else might have happened. And I was very similar. Really, my journey in environment and sustainability started when I was at the BBC. I was a general reporter at the time. And the BSE inquiry started. Now, I don't know if you can cast your mind back
Oh, yeah.
to bovine spongiform encephalopathy, which was a terrible disease that affected livestock and destroyed many, many farming businesses up and down the country. There was a subsequent inquiry, and I said to my editor at the time, I was working for all the BBC local radio stations. There's something that was called the General News Service, which I don't even think exists anymore, but we provided tailored local news to local and regional radio stations at the part of the BBC family. And I said, look, we are going to have farmers, we are going to have victims of this terrible disease, and they're all going to be interested in what comes out of this inquiry. So I think we should have a presence. And it was, I mean, it was a terrible thing to hear when you heard the parents or loved ones of victims of the human form of the disease as well, but also of hearing of farmers and the agricultural effect and impact that this had had. And one thing led to another. You get chatting in the coffee breaks to people, and there were people from the NFU there, and they were talking about subjects that you thought, oh, gosh, that's really interesting. Why aren't we talking about these things more widely? And so I started doing more and more agricultural stories, and then environment stories would come my way at the same time. And so eventually I developed a bit of a practice, a space in the kind of environment, rural affairs space, agriculture space, where people would hear me on the radio and they think, well, I've got quite a good story. I'll tell you that one as well. But I always think, and this is true in my professional life as well, the best stories, the best examples come to you when you're not looking for them,
Mhm.
when you're having that conversation, in the middle of a conference or in a coffee break. And again, with early career professionals, I always say, those are your golden moments. Those are the times where you can change the course of your career.
Yeah. So what was the next step then from the BBC?
So, worked my way through the BBC,
Yeah.
ending as environment correspondent and rural affairs, and then environment correspondent for the major television and radio networks and internationally as well. Um, and I got to a point where I thought, well, I could do this all over again. I had a mental tick list of all the things that I wanted to do, from our own correspondent, Newsnight, co-presenter, a national news program, and I worked my way through them. And I thought, well, I could do it all over again, or I could go and do something else. So I took voluntary redundancy, which was being offered at the time, and originally started working in the water industry, and that was, well, I think a bit like the Parson's nose, good in parts, as they say. Although it did it did give me a good understanding. There were some great people I worked with, but I don't think it was a surprise to many of us that we have ended up where we are now with the water industry.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from some amazing colleagues, but the systemic problems were there to see even at that time, which was kind of 2012, 2013. After that, I moved into the agricultural inputs or agricultural chemicals sector, partly because I thought we needed to find a less toxic conversation to have around what we needed to support British farming.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of very angry, very fixed views, sometimes very marginally on either side of the argument. It's sometimes very difficult to find a middle ground and areas that you might be able to agree on. And then the job, as you said, IEMA came up, and I was asked whether I wanted to apply, and it was almost, I felt like I'd come home. I'm not just saying this because you're a fellow, but it is the most gorgeous job you can think of. I mean, the members are fantastic. You're all trying to save the planet. You're doing amazing things. You're a delight to work with, and it's a delight to work with the my amazing colleagues at ISEP as well. They are a passionate, really energetic group of people who really want to do the best for members and for sustainability.
Yes, absolutely. And let's go on to ISIP then.
Yeah.
What's your sort of elevator pitch if somebody asks you what does ISIP do? What's your standard
So
response?
yes, yes, and funnily enough, do you think a lot in business about elevator pitches, don't you? Because you always think, well, there may be that moment that you get to talk to somebody really important. I mean, I would say that ISEP, the Institute of Sustainability and Environmental Professionals, and we can maybe talk a little bit about why we are that name now
Yeah,
and not IEMA. We are the global membership body that sets the standard for anyone wanting sustainable change that delivers for the environment, for society, and the economy.
yeah,
And our purpose is to empower our members to become those global change makers so they can transform the world today for a sustainable future tomorrow. So
yeah.
that would be the way I would describe us. We have 21,000 members in more than 120 countries, and we are there to support our members in their professional journey, to empower them, and also to reflect what they want to the policy and decision makers around the globe.
Yes, there's so many threads here to pick up on, but I'll pick up on the first one that you left dangling out there, which is, the recent rebrand last summer. IEMA was a very well established brand. And I don't want to answer the question for you because I felt it was part of what I did rather than all of what I did. But what was the purpose behind the rebrand?
Well, Gareth, you were not alone in thinking it was part of what you did. The way it's been described to me by and one of our members is ISEP is who we are rather than what we do. And it took us a long time. It originally started when we were thinking about chartership as an organisation, which was a conversation that had started before I had arrived. And for various reasons, Brexit, the capacity for government departments to actually deal with what can be quite complicated things around chartership, we were advised by the Privy Council to just really start again in that thinking. And one of the conversations we had was, well, if you do decide to go down a chartership route, you have to be really clear about what your objectives are and also what your name is, because you can't change it.
Yeah,
And this started a lot of conversations with members about, well, does IEMA reflect what members see themselves as doing and achieving? And we had 2 years. I mean, as you'll know, 2 years of conversations, lots of workshops, lots of questionnaires and that sort of thing. And what came out quite clearly was that members felt that IEMA represented part of the role, but not the whole role, and that we were almost with so many people who had sustainability as somewhere in their title or in their responsibilities that we weren't really reflecting that. And so we put a number of names to members, and ISEP, the Institute of Sustainability and Environmental Professionals, was the one that came out really quite clearly in front as the the name that people wanted. We worked with a great group of people who helped us with the brand as well, and that lovely, clean, new branding that we've got. And then we put it to a extraordinary general meeting, and we had to get more than 75% membership approval in order to pass it. So that is a high bar, and nobody was absolutely certain that that would happen. In the end, it was 81%. But we are very aware that that means that 19% of members weren't happy, and they were not happy enough to come and vote to say that they were not happy at the EGM. So we are aware that that is the case, and we are always very mindful that we want to make sure that those members feel as happy being part of ISEP as they did as part of IEMA.
Well, I think if you get 81%, I don't think anybody's going to complain too much. Other significant votes that you may or may not have mentioned have been a lot closer than that.
Well, do you know that it's I'm very lucky in my job. Not a lot keeps me awake at night, but that was one thing that did, because there are so many examples of name changes that have gone. I mean, normally in the corporate sector, where people change their name and it lands completely flat with their customers or their audiences. But I was very aware that this could go very wrong. I mean, so far it seems to have really reinvigorated in some way the organisation, particularly with our members outside the UK and outside UK territories as well, because it's much easier to explain to your boss or your client or your customer what you are and who you're part of because of that clarity in the title.
Yeah, well, personally, I was delighted, and I'm not just saying that because you're on here, but IEMA tended to have that sort of ISO 14001 environmental management side, whereas which I find a bit tedious. Somebody has to do it, but preferably not me. And I find the sustainability and environmental professionals much better. The other thread that you dropped there, and I suppose it goes back to when you were talking about the agricultural sector being sort of very entrenched views and getting a bit toxic. The sustainability debate in the in the media and in the public domain seems to have got extremely turbulent of late. What's somebody, as you say, lobbying on behalf of the profession? What's your take on this when you're actually talking to policymakers?
Well, I do think, and you're absolutely right, it has got a lot more turbulent, but I think, well, a couple of things. First of all, you need to, and we all need to, as professionals, kind of separate the noise from what's actually going on. It's very easy to go onto any social media channel or open any paper or look at any form of communication and see angry people shouting at each other. I mean, that seems to be some social media platforms' business model, basically, is to get angry people shouting at each other, because the more people react and say you're completely wrong, the more likes or dislikes you get, the more reaction you get, the more money you get. So I think for a lot of people, this is a way of generating an income, is through this anger. But if you strip it away and you see actually what's happening, then I think certainly our State of the Profession report last year, and we're starting again, we're asking for members to get in touch with us for this year's one, so please do if you've got an opportunity and you're an ISEP member. Last year, certainly members said that the vast majority of their organisations were either spending the same amount or even more on sustainability and sustainability issues, because it is simply a business risk that probably should sit on everybody's risk register in terms of what's going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years. Just saying, oh, climate change is a load of nonsense, or man-made climate change is a load of nonsense. Even if you believe that, the statistics suggest that the Met Office has figures to suggest that some parts of the country are now 150% wetter than they were in the 1990s. Mm-hmm. So are we going to build, it's not woke to think we need houses that aren't going to flood and communities where people aren't going to be going through that dreadful flooding experience on a regular basis, or that companies won't have, will have factories that won't be 6 foot underwater every 5 years, or indeed that we have communities that aren't being choked by air pollution, because again, that's something that we don't often talk about. Is that part of sustainability? Reducing carbon emissions, reducing particulates in communities where between 20 and 30,000 people a year die from problems with air pollution in this country. I mean, if you had anything that was being driven by anything else, it would be a permanent national scandal. The WHO suggests that 99% of the global population are in some way have their lives limited by exposure to particulates or to toxic air pollution. 99% of the global population. That's not woke to say, I'd rather that wasn't happening, and here are the policies that we could use not to. Having said that, I do think that we have not been good as a sector in articulating the stories that matter to normal people. Mm-hmm. There have been a lot of people of immense privilege who have kind of taken up sustainability and talked about stuff that doesn't really affect a lot of people's lives. You can't talk about organic food if people don't have enough money to buy ordinary fruit and vegetables, and are stressing about the fact that that ordinary fruit and vegetables are not organic. That is not where you want to be. You can't keep on chastising people for their choices when they're making choices with very limited income and very limited headspace in order to think, do I pay the rent or do I feed the kids? And so we need more people talking about the reality of life, including energy bills, and how we articulate that, I think, is really important for the future.
Yeah. Do you feed into, are you consulted on government policy? We've had the Warm Homes Plan announced recently. Does ISEP, as a matter of course, get a say in that, or do you have to sort of get your elbows sharpened up and elbow your way into the conversation?
It depends on the conversation. I mean, we have been very close to things like the Environmental Improvement Plan. We've been part of the stakeholder groups on that. We have good relationships with DESNs. We contributed very extensively to the Green Jobs Delivery Plan, which was pretty much finished with just unfortunately, as the previous administration called an election. And so it was sitting there almost ready to be actually brought into action. And I think it's a great shame that the current administration has kind of said, well, we're not going to do that now. We've got something else over here that we're going to do instead. I think there was a lot of really good thinking done by a very, very broad coalition of people, including trades unions and professional institutes and business, that we could easily adopt, and it would be a great shame if that thinking was completely kind of jettisoned. We're observers to the UN COP processes as well, and we do input on at that level through ISO. So we've got members of members and also members of the staff team who are involved or chairing ISO committees, which will help with that. And we work through the business and NGO communities as well. So there's lots of different bits. Obviously, we are a small organisation and we have to be really clear about how we prioritise that. So we have a member committee called the Policy and Practice Committee, which is member-led, and that sets the policy programme for each year. So there's real clarity and there's a very straight line between what members want and what we're delivering as well. So we make sure that the work that we do is first and foremost driven by members and what they want to see.
Yeah. And of course, you've subtly reminded me that I was talking about the UK, of course, and ISEP is an international organisation, so of course, COP, etc. And you mentioned green sector jobs and skills. It's always a thing in my head of how do you define green skills? If somebody's a plumber and one day they're plumbing in gas combi boilers, and one day they're plumbing in heat pumps. At what point do they become a green job or having green skills?
Well, that's a really good question, because one of our mantras is all jobs greener, because I mean, certainly we would say it, and we work with about 300 businesses to help with their training in skills and training in sustainability.
Mhm.
And there is not a bit of an organization where you don't need some understanding of sustainability. Because if you're in procurement, I mean, how are you going to make the best choice or the most sustainable choice? And again, back to how we talk about this, one of our corporate partners, one of the people who have, is very involved in the work that we do, says it's all about driving down carbon. If you drive down carbon, you drive down energy, and if you drive down energy, you drive down costs. Now, for her, that is. For others, obviously, carbon is one part of it, and there's obviously biodiversity net gain. There's a lot of other areas that you need to consider when you're looking at green jobs. But I would say, to your question about the plumber, if they're suitably and appropriately trained, then yes, that's a green job. And we need to, I think we as a sector need to make it very clear that it isn't just people, wafting about in an office who are they're the future of the green economy. The people we really, really need are plumbers and heat pump engineers, welders. I've had so many conversations up and down the country with people in the green economy who say we simply don't have enough welders. We don't have enough people to literally put together the infrastructure that we need to drive a more sustainable economy. And I think we need to find a way of talking about energy prices, because saying that energy prices will fall in 2028 is not a lot of help if you're desperate. I mean, I remember I was brought up in a combination of rented housing and council housing when I was little. I remember the meter. We had a meter because we weren't trusted to pay the bills, and you put that 10p in the meter,
Yeah.
and it clicks in, and then at some point it goes off, and everybody's thinking, well, where's the money going to come from to put the next lot
Yeah.
in? And that's the reality for millions of people up and down the country. And to say, oh, well, don't worry, because there's 300 quid off your bills at the end of the decade, you might as well have said in 30,057. It's not going to help. So how we get to where we are now, to where we need to be in terms of people's energy security, is really, really important.
Yeah. But it is interesting because the narrative, going back to the media thing, the narrative is often net zero will kill jobs.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yet, companies pull octopus because out of the air because they have they're trying to train up enough people to install
Yes.
pumps and are struggling to get enough people through the system. So it, I'm trying to formulate a question out of this, but how do we balance those things? Should we be pushing the positive stories that mightn't sell as many newspapers or get as many clicks online? 200 graduates, or sorry, 200 people upskilled to install heat pumps. How do we turn that into a press story that people will actually report?
Well, it's very interesting you say this, because as a former journalist, I can absolutely attest to the fact that editors don't want good news. I always used to find that some of the most interesting stories were when two people you think would not agree actually agreed. So we had was trying to get one together on the Countryside and Writers of Way Act, and there were two people from very different points of view and quite kind of active rambler kind of association, and a landowner who actually agreed on a particular part of this legislation. I thought, how interesting. And I thought, well, if I was a listener, I'd find that quite interesting as well. But that's not what the Today programme wanted. They wanted a row. So we didn't get on.
Yeah.
But I do wonder whether there is space, and I don't know where that space might be, but space for stories that encourage and affirm and make people feel good about the future. I have so many conversations, not in a professional capacity, but with my friends and family, who say, I've just stopped listening to news. I'm not looking at social media because it makes me depressed and anxious. And so if there is a way of supporting those good stories that actually, as you said, that you look at any of the figures that anybody, any governmental organisation in this country or anywhere in the developed world are putting out. We need millions and millions of people to create this new, more sustainable, greener future. The government in this country has talked about hundreds of thousands. If you look in, even in the States, even now, since the dismantling of so many programs by the federal government, even now you're still talking about tens or hundreds of thousands of people for the new economy, and the same in Europe. So to be able to say, you could get skilled in this and you'll have a job for life wherever you want to work in the world, because these skills are like gold dust. It's like being a doctor. The demand outstrips the supply. But then, of course, that suggests, well, what are we doing as a government, and what is the country doing in order to ensure that we have a steady supply of the right people? And at the moment, it is getting wrong in both ways. In some skills, there are people who are coming out skilled and trained and they can't get a job. In others, there are people who are desperately in need of skilled people, but there's no supply line. I've been really impressed, I have to say, by some of the work that some of the regional mayors have done, because that's at a scale where you can get training colleges, universities, employers, local government at that level together and come up with a plan of what works in terms of skills and training. And there's been some really interesting work that's come out of some of the regional mayoralties around this that has actually worked and been successful. So maybe that's the kind of level regionally that we have to think about in terms of how we get that success.
And going back to ISEP, do you cover the whole gamut of green skills then, from sort of blue collar welding and whatnot, right up to, business consultants and people like me, I suppose, a bit arrogant, but
not at all.
No,
To people like you, well, you're our fellows. You're one of our senior members, and that should be truly celebrated. So the answer is yes, through the various training courses that we provide and the support that we give, particularly to our corporate partners. So we have courses that last half a day or a day, up to much longer ones. And then, of course, if you're going through a full professional journey like you've done, you move through an assessment process which becomes more and more rigorous and involved the further and further you get. And then we also, having talked about chartership, we do in fact charter environmentalists through our partner organisation, the Society for the Environment, which is a society of 26, I think, other organisations, including ourselves, who've got together to do exactly this sort of thing, to train and develop and help to set standards across the environmental spectrum. So I think of the organisation, we probably have more chartered environmentalists through ISEP than perhaps some other of our colleagues. But the great thing is you are a chartered environmentalist, which is a real mark. It's really tough to become a chartered environmentalist, and you are rightly praised and recognised by your organisations and other organisations that will definitely help you in your own professional journey.
Yeah. I was going to, you keep teeing up my next question that I was thinking of very nicely, but my next question was about that.
Glad I've got my uses.
I haven't gone for chartered environmentalist because I'm already a chartered engineer, but I'm worried about almost having too many letters after my name. But do you get feedback on how much recognition you get from being a member, somebody being a member of ISEP? And we should clarify to people that you don't just pay your money to become a member; you have to achieve membership. It is a status. But do you get feedback from employers about how well recognised those different levels of membership are?
Yes, and just to differentiate, so there is a non-professional path that you can take. So you can become an affiliate of the organisation, which does not give you the letters after your name, as it were, but take a shorter course. If you are to get the letters after your name, then it's a more rigorous course, and obviously as you go through and become more senior within the institution, that becomes more and more involved as you point out. I mean, certainly there are many organisations now that will specify IEMA ISEP. Oh, I'm getting it wrong now. ISEP membership as a prerequisite for the role, and we see that increasingly because, in the same way as you would want a chartered member of the Law Society or a chartered environment engineer as you are, or chartered structural engineer to do your work. You want someone with the appropriate skills and knowledge to support your sustainability objectives, because, as you know very, very well, it's a very fast moving and quite complex role now. You can't just rock up and have a few warm words about climate change. There's a lot of regulation. There's a lot of auditing that you are expected to do now as a sustainability specialist. There's a lot of ISO standards, national and international standards like TCFD and TNFD that you're expected to understand and be able to audit appropriately. We've recently set up a carbon accounting register to recognise that carbon accountants now have their own very specialised role, and we've recently produced a course to support them with that as well. So it is in the past, I think sometimes sustainability was sometimes in corporate relations or the PR or communications part of the organisation. We're seeing more now that it either sits in its own in a team of its own, or it's sitting within procurement or operations or logistics, because that's in a way recognising that quite specialist set of skills, without wishing to quote Liam Neeson, that you need to be a sustainability expert.
Yeah, of course. My next question might trigger more culture war here, but because it's about diversity in the sector, because the ISEP has a diverse sustainability initiative. Can you tell us the background to that and how you feel the sector is doing on diversity?
So when I arrived, I was realised I was one of the very few people of colour to be leading an organisation in the sector, or indeed to be in senior management in an organisation in this sector. And we had a significant amount of evidence to suggest that this was a systemic sectoral problem and not just one for IEMA, as we were then. Indeed, there was some work done by Policy Exchange that suggested that sustainability was the second least diverse sector in the UK economy, and that was second only to farming, interestingly. And for me, and I was I'm very grateful to the board, the then IEMA board, for agreeing with me. It seemed to me that this was a potentially existential threat for the sector, because unless you represent the people that you're trying to support, or the people you're working for, and in this case this is the people in Britain, far less the people in the other 120 odd countries that we have membership in. But if you even just concentrate on Britain, the diversity is increasing in the UK population, and unless you are reflecting that, you are putting yourself at a strategic and a business disadvantage. And eventually someone will say, well, you don't really, I don't recognise anything that you're doing. What's the point of you as a sector? And so we started with the Diverse Sustainability Initiative to ask anybody. It was open to anybody in the sector, any organisation, to join and to support the objectives, which is to recognise. We started with people of colour and LGBTQIA plus members. We've now begun a neurodiversity group as well. Because, I think we all know, those of us who are lucky enough to work in organisations which do have diversity, people will tell you things and think of things, and it doesn't have to be to do with your cultural heritage. It can be do with your background. Personally, having grown up in a very white working class area, that worries me as well, that we just, again, that is another group of people who just aren't reflected in the sector. Unless you have those views coming through, you're not going to make the best business decisions, because you will not be able to see ahead of you some obvious traps or or things that could trap you if you don't think about them. So it's been a great journey. We have an amazing DSI officer, Caris, who is absolutely incredible. Just the energy and passion she brings to this. We're not stopping there. We are aware that ISEP membership, when we did the last member survey, I think it was between 5 and 6% of our membership self-described as people with physical or visual other challenges. And so that's something else we need to think about. I mean, how can we reflect that as well to make sure that we are doing the best for our members and our members are able to play the part that they should be able to play in organisations?
Yeah, so I've a mea culpa is that I struggle with to get a diverse guests on my range of guests on the podcast. I know podcasting is the cliche is it's sort of middle class, middle aged centrist dads like me. And it and it lives like that. But I suppose one of the problems I always have is that I I find that looking at the gender divide, men are much quicker to say yes, I'll come on the podcast and blow my own trumpet for 45 minutes. Whereas I tend to find women will say, I'll just check that this is okay with with the corporate comms
Yeah.
and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. But I tried, but it has been difficult, and I know some people say I probably don't try hard enough.
Well, do you know, it's interesting you say that because we had a webinar last year, was it last year or year before last? And it was inspiring confidence in women.
Yeah,
And I thought that it would be early career. Well, what did I think? I thought it would not be early career women because erroneously, as it pointed out, as it turned out, I thought that early career women would be, they've had a far more equal acceptance in university. It's much more balanced than it was when I was going through university, and that they've got their power and their strength, and they wouldn't really need a conversation about confidence for women, and yet we had people at every single stage of their professional journey, from graduates, students, graduates, all the way up to people who've been in organisations or in working life for 10, 20 plus years. And I was quite shocked by that because if you're still thinking after 15 or 20 years, do you know that webinar will be really helpful for me because I don't have confidence in myself for whatever reason that is within my organisation, then we're doing something wrong, aren't we? I think. I mean, if we had, and women still say this to each other. I mean, I still feel it sometimes when I go in. I mean, I run an organisation. I've done for many years. If I go into a room full of kind of laughing people, with these big receptions where everybody seems to know each other and is laughing, and they're all exchanging business cards. I go back to being that girl off the council estate and thinking, oh gosh, am I going to use the right fork, or should I be drinking this now, or what do I look like? And yes, that feeling that of confidence, which people who go to private schools have. People, I mean, I'm not demonizing them for that.
yeah,
You go where you go, but there is a certain confidence that certain routes give you that other routes don't, and that will stay with you. And it becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're not confident, then you're not confident enough to go and look for those other job opportunities. So it doesn't surprise me. And it's actually made me think we should probably have that webinar, do that webinar again, actually, for those other members. And it's not just women. There are men who come from particular backgrounds who feel the same.
mm,
If you come from a working class background, sometimes you do feel, gosh, I've not. I don't know quite. I can't quite read the room. Everybody seems to, there's a language, or there's a kind of unspoken language that everybody else seems to know and I don't. I still feel a lot.
yeah.
Particularly if you're in a certain group of people who think there's something going on here, but I don't get that. I don't get what they're talking about.
Yeah, I don't want to get to the stage of inviting people by saying, I want you to come on and talk about your experiences of being from a particular background in the podcast. Maybe I should a lot more. Yeah, so what's you've obviously been through this massive rebranding, so you're probably quite exhausted. But what's next? What's the next big thing in the horizon for the institute?
So I think we are really just planning to get the benefit from the new name, and also we're going through a big IT project as well this year that hopefully will deliver real benefits to members. I know it hasn't been what members have wanted. You know, things like our CPD has not been where we want it to be, and it's been more difficult than it should be to access some things on the website and that sort of thing. I'm very much hoping that will start to get better through the course of this year. We've got Connect, of course, as we always do in October, and we've got two COPs, the climate change COP and the biodiversity COP happening in Istanbul and Armenia. Obviously, we always make a very careful decision as to whether we go or not, because it's an expense and it's carbon and it's all sorts of things. For example, we didn't go to Brazil last year for all sorts of reasons, financial reasons, but also to think about whether actually members are going to get a benefit from us going.
Mm.
So we'll think about that again this year, and maybe we'll reflect it from the UK, or maybe we will have a very small team there. I mean, certainly I've been to many COPs as a journalist, and I've been to a few with ISEP, and whenever we go, we make a huge number of connections. There are lots of members, particularly members from outside the UK who are there with their organisations or with their governments, because often they're parts of government delegations as well. And it's a really good opportunity to help them feel connected back into the ISEP family. But it's never a given. It's always a careful decision with our board as well. We've got three fantastic new board members who've just joined us, who have a wealth of experience, and I'm very much hoping will help us through the next stage in growth and development. But always members come first. So if there's things that you want to see that you don't see, if there's things that you're enjoying and you want to see more of, do always let us know, because all the way through the organisation, we spend a lot of time thinking about members' reactions and what they've asked from us. And we do, if you ask, we do our very, very best to make sure that it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, and I suppose really to finish up, if people are listening to this who aren't members and are thinking, "Oh, actually, ISIP now sounds to me like my home," what should their first step be?
Info@isepglobal.org, or just have a look at the website, or get in touch with myself. I mean, you've got it's smukherjee@isepglobal.org. Do let me know, and I'll put you in touch with our amazing membership team, who are lovely. Oh my goodness, they're so lovely. We have so many so many bouquets, email bouquets, as it were, come through for the membership team. So yes, do let us know. And if you're not a member but you're interested in just finding out a little bit more, the website is the best first place as well, and it gives you a lot of the information that we've just talked about, but also things like articles and blogs. We have quite a few pieces of content that are this side of the paywall, if you like, so you can have a look without necessarily committing to join just yet, although obviously I would encourage you to do so.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us today, Sarah. I think that was a very interesting conversation we had.
Oh, it was an absolute pleasure. Thanks for inviting me, Gareth, and best of the rest of the week or the day or the afternoon, or wherever you're listening, wherever you are as well.
Yeah, thank you very much.